CC button at the bottom, the live CC button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Thank you to Javier for providing these. Please use the Q&A feature for any questions. You can choose to do this anonymously. There will be about 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A at the end of the presentation. Please use the chat for general comments or technical issues. Adebola will be monitoring the chat for any questions or comments. And as you have seen, Adebola will be adding some links into the chat as well. One is for collaborative resource sharing. If you think of related readings, podcasts, videos, anything else, please share it with us in the Calms resources Zotero or in the chat. One of our volunteers is dropping that now. And then the next link, if you haven't seen it already, is the conference code of conduct. So please abide by that as well. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Jason.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you, Moya. I appreciate that. And I want to thank everyone for joining me today for this presentation on creating an emotionally intelligent library culture. I'm excited and honored to be presenting this webinar to you today. Emotional intelligence is one of my favorite topics, and it's always a pleasure for me to share this interest with others. I wanted to briefly introduce myself. As Moya said, I'm the director of the Cook Library and Learning Center at Florida State University, Panama City. I've researched, published, and presented on leadership, organizational culture, and emotional intelligence. I have 2 publications on emotional intelligence. And at the end of this webinar, I want to give you a couple of resources I used to put together this presentation and that have really helped me. Also in the chat, I dropped a link to the sort of the Calm, I guess, repository is osf.io. The link starts off like that way, and then the PowerPoint's up there if you want to go back and grab that PowerPoint and look over anything that I mentioned in here. So what we're going to be focusing on is modeling good organizational behavior using emotional intelligence. So when I first did this presentation, it was focused on library leadership, but I've expanded this version to be about everyone in a library. This includes all types of libraries, K-12, public, academic, special, wherever you might work. And what we're going to discuss through this webinar is why it's important for us to model good organizational behavior. So kind of a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about in this webinar. I'm going to talk about what emotional intelligence is and why it's important for libraries. Next, I will talk about the 4 components of emotional intelligence, and that's self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And then for each of these components, we're going to talk about what it is, why it's important, how we can demonstrate it, and how we can develop it. All aspects of emotional intelligence can be learned, and we'll talk about some specifics as we go through this presentation, but the general keys to learning emotional intelligence are really just a motivation to learn, to practice, visualize, and rehearse, and to get feedback. And as Moya said, there'll be some time at the end to ask and answer questions. But if you have questions as we go along, just pop them into that Q&A. And I also want to say too, like, I'm not some guru on this thing. I'm not perfect in this. I every day, it's a learning process for me, right? There are times when I just even recently when I was like, I'm not following like in doing these things I talk about in emotional intelligence. So I'm far from perfect. And so I learn every day as well. So we can all kind of learn together. Okay. So what is emotional intelligence? So Salovey and Mayer, in their 1990 article, they studied and developed the concept of emotional intelligence. And then Daniel Goleman, in his 1995 book, Emotional Intelligence, he really popularized this concept. Okay. And Goleman defines emotional intelligence as, at the most general level, it refers to the ability to recognize and regulate emotions in ourselves and in others. On the value of emotional intelligence, Salovey and Mayer wrote, These skills enable individuals to gauge accurately the effective responses in others and to choose socially adaptive behaviors in response. Such individuals should be perceived as genuine and warm by others, while individuals lacking these skills should appear oblivious and boorish. So as I said, emotional intelligence consists of 4 parts. That's self-awareness, being aware of ourselves and our emotions, self-management, managing ourselves, social awareness, so being aware of others and of their emotions, and then relationship management, and being able to being aware of others' emotions and giving a good response to those emotions. And Goldman developed this 2x2 model of emotional intelligence. Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. You can see the awareness and management, and then in self and in others. And like I said, we'll discuss each of these concepts in greater detail as we move on. But up here on the screen is just kind of a brief overview of each of those 4 concepts. And you see things like self-control, work-life balance, knowing who you are, having empathy, and being able to build relationships with others. So the 2 cornerstones of emotional intelligence are really self-awareness and social awareness. And this means knowing and understanding ourselves, and then using empathy to know and understand others. So no one in a library works alone, right? Where we all work together in some way, and emotions are actually contagious. You have people who get excited, and everybody else gets excited. People get sad, everybody else gets sad, whatever. So emotions are actually contagious in the workplace. And since the 1970s, and what employers are looking for and have been looking for in employees in new hires has changed, and what organizations need to do to succeed has changed as well. The 2 most important abilities now are really team building and adapting to change. So when employers are asked to list what skills they find most important, technical competence is now less important than the ability to learn and to possess, develop, and use emotional intelligence. Expertise is sort of a baseline concept, right? You have to be able to catalog books and search databases effectively, but social skills and emotional intelligence are now exceptionally important. When compared to technical competence and IQ, emotional intelligence is twice as important for success in the workplace. 3 conditions are needed for a group's effectiveness. That's trust, group identity, and a sense of group efficacy. Organizational culture and emotional culture provide this. Trust is non-existent in an organization where emotions are not managed well. And culture provides the identity groups need to be cohesive. Groups with high emotional intelligence are able to work with emotions, develop an affirmative environment, are proactive problem solvers, and develop cross-boundary relationships more easily. Further, there is something in organizations called affective commitment. And this is the strong commitment and attachment that a person has to an organization that really transcends status and job duties and even salary. This loyalty to an organization is not to a name, a product, or building, but to the people in the organization. And having a healthy emotional culture allows us to form those bonds and loyalty to one another. So culture is the shared values, norms, and accepted behaviors of the organization. We most often talk about culture in what work is performed and how it's performed. But emotional culture is just as important. It affects engagement, satisfaction, performance, and even absenteeism. Resonant cultures are more innovative, work together better, and are more open to change. So not that long ago, we would not have talked about emotions in the workplace. We wouldn't be having this presentation and this discussion. or that they were even sort of bad to have in a work setting, right? You come to work and you leave all that other stuff behind, you leave it at the door, and you come in and do your job. One of my favorite shows is Mad Men. If anybody ever watched Mad Men, and there's a scene where Joan walks in and she said, she tells the other secretaries, there's no crying in the break room, it worsens morale. But emotions are perfectly fine in the workplace. Emotions are just simply energy that can lead to action, but they have to be managed by ourselves correctly and responded to correctly in others. So not expressing emotions or keeping them all bottled up can lead to stress, anxiety, depression, and burnout. Not allowing emotions to be expressed leads to passive aggressive behavior and then back channel sabotage, right? But too much emotion can stymie progress and shut down conversations. As Daniel Goleman puts it, out of control emotions can make smart people stupid. And that's why we're not supposed to make decisions like when we're angry or really upset about something, because we're not quite in the right headspace that we need to make those decisions. And this actually has a biological basis. So as our heart rates increase, our blood flow is diverted from the higher cognitive areas of the brain to more essential bodily functions important for survival. And this is part of the biological process known as fight, flight, or freeze. And so if you were being chased by a bear, or I live in Florida, so if you're being chased by an alligator, your higher cognitive functions are of little use, right? You're not going to stop and reason with the alligator or give him time to read your well-developed lib guide on why chasing me is bad. You just got to run. And I recently learned, did you ever hear that serpentine? You're supposed to run serpentine to get away from an alligator. Doesn't work. They can make those serpentine movements as well. But I digress. All right. So emotions can be expressed in non-productive ways, right, which hurts everyone. Emotional outbursts can be one of those ways, whether it's in a group meeting or one-on-one interaction. When we confront an emotional outburst, we have several tactics to try. So think about if somebody just kind of stood up and was sort of yelling and just kind of, a little out of control. The first thing we do want to do is we want to remain calm. Getting more upset than the other person only escalates the situation. When I was much younger, I used to try to out yell people. That does not work. All right, so don't do that. And you want to interrupt the person's name or interrupt them, excuse me, by repeating the person's name loud enough to be heard. And you kind of want to raise your hand or wave the arm to get the person's attention. You say, Jason, and you want to kind of break there and get their attention onto you. So you kind of break what they're going through, that kind of emotional cycle. And then the third thing is you can either address their concerns or you can redirect their behavior. So you can say something like, "Oh, I'm sorry that you're so upset. No one should have to feel this way. How is it that I can help, or how can we help you?" Or you can say, when you're ready to discuss this in a respectful manner, I will be here, we'll be here, but until then you have to leave until you can come back and talk to everybody in a respectful way. And to successfully manage a situation like that, we need to have a high emotional intelligence. So this doesn't mean that we show no emotion whatsoever. We need to be able to stay grounded and use emotions wisely. Again, too little emotion makes you look non-human, but too much emotion and you look like you're not in control of the situation or yourself. And as I said earlier, leadership is emotional. As a leader, you're building relationships with people, and that is emotional. We spend a lot of time at work, and we do get invested in the work that we do. So we want to know that the work we do matters and has meaning. And all of this is part of managing and leading an emotional culture and being part of a healthy library emotional culture. All right. So we want to stay grounded. We want to show emotions because it shows that we care. And we want to use those emotions to our advantage. All right. We want to be able to control them. Don't let them control us. And again, to be good at this, we need to use emotions wisely. And we need to have a high level of emotional intelligence to do that. So self-awareness, like I said, is one of the two cornerstones of emotional intelligence, the other being empathy. And Daniel Goleman, in his 2005 update to the book Emotional Intelligence, defines self-awareness as the ability to assess oneself realistically and to notice, diagnose, and comprehend one's moods, emotions, and drives, as well as their effect on others. So people who have high self-awareness notice and understand their moods and emotional states. They know their strengths, what events and people have shaped them, and they have long-term goals and objectives. And this is a key component of managing stress. You need self-awareness to realize just how stressful your job is or the situation that you are in is in order to find healthy ways to manage it. So self-awareness is about more than understanding our emotions and moods. Self-awareness includes accepting who we are as a person. Self-aware individuals have a strong value system and are value-driven in everything that they do. Their values drive their decisions, and they're keenly aware of what motivates them. They also know when to make decisions and why they are making those decisions. Too often we get hung up in a negative emotion. We're tired, or we're basing our decision on past experiences instead of what is in front of us at the moment. So self-awareness manifests itself through honesty, openness, confidence, and perhaps most importantly, a self-deprecating sense of humor. If you can kind of poke fun at yourself, then you're a pretty self-aware person, and you're pretty confident and comfortable at who you are. Self-aware people, they're independent, they're positive, and they don't remain stuck in a bad mood, right? They're confident and they speak with a conviction that comes from their values. So they're going to recognize when they're in a bad mood, in a bad frame of mind, not in the right attitude, they're going to be able to kind of get out of that and realize it's not the best, and kind of resituate themselves to get into the right kind of headspace. So just a quick recap to become more self-aware. So we want to know our motivations and our values, and we want to learn to accept ourselves. This will lead to us becoming an authentic person, all right, one who knows themselves, accepts themselves, lives by their values, and works to their strengths. This is all characteristics of a self-aware person. I'm very much a fan of working on your weaknesses and bringing them up and strengthening them. But you also have to realize like where your strengths are and really work to those. You can't spend all your time trying to bring your kind of weak areas up for improvement. There's only kind of a certain cap level that you're going to get to that, right? So what are our strengths, and build on those, and that's what a good self-aware person is going to do. So some things to think about, right? As far as like an emotional culture goes. So what look are you projecting to the world? And is this chosen by you? Are you purposely giving this look? Is this dictated by your mood? Is this kind of how you default sort of look? And what does that look say to the world, right? Does it say, I don't care? Does it say, leave me alone? Does it say, I'm here for you? And when I say look, I don't mean like how you dress or how you comb your hair. I'm talking about like, these various expressions that we have, these kind of, what's our facial expressions like? What's our body language like? Are we closed off and hunched down? Are we open with our body language? These are important things that we need to think about as far as our emotional intelligence goes. Okay, so Are your emotions and your body language and your facial expressions aligned? And when we tell people we want to listen to them, again, when we sit back and we cross our arms, we're sending two very different messages. This is closed off body language, and people aren't going to want to talk to us and open up and express to us because we're not giving an open body language symbol, right? So we need to make sure that our outer appearance is aligned with what we're saying to others. And again, a self-aware person is going to be aware of their unconscious biases. And this isn't just related to a person's, ethnicity or race or gender or religion, but it's also maybe our preconceived notions of somebody or our past experiences with somebody. So we might in the past have developed a notion that a person's just not a hard worker, or that we have an idea that another person is a hard worker because of some past experiences. But those might not be true, no longer true, especially in the moment that we're dealing with them and working with them. So we need to be able to see every person and situation with some fresh eyes. This requires us, again, to be aware and also to be mindful. And how we relate to others shapes in part their behavior to us, right? So if we always think of somebody as like the problem in the library, then they're going to start eventually kind of acting like the problem because, well, it doesn't matter what I do, that's what you think of me, and that's ends up shaping them and how they are in the library. So being self-aware means knowing if you're in control of your emotions or your emotions are in control of you. So what is driving you to take action? Is it a reasonable action to take? Or are your actions being skewed by your emotional state? It's perfectly all right to be angry about a particular situation, but it's not all right to let your anger drive your decision-making process. You might say some things or do some things that are just not appropriate and just too harsh and extreme for the situation. And later, when you kind of gather yourself, then you're going to realize, I gotta walk this back, right, and make some changes. Okay. So what are some ways we can develop self-awareness? One is through a conscious pause, just throughout the day. Just kind of stop what you're doing and just think, right now I'm thinking what? Right now I'm feeling what? And just kind of do kind of a body scan and just kind of figure out what you're feeling and what you're thinking. And it makes you more, again, you begin to develop that awareness for what's going on. You might notice, your neck hurts. Is that because you're holding your head weird when you're working, or is it just you got some stress going on and that's where it shows up in your neck? This is a kind of a mindfulness practice. And I know this is a pretty hot topic. Everyone, and their cousin is talking about mindfulness, but it really does have some great benefits for us. And that mindfulness practice comes in many forms, but this conscious pause exercise we just talked about, from anything from doing that up to like a formal kind of sitting meditation. But by developing mindfulness, we become more self-aware and socially aware. We understand what we're doing and, more importantly, why we're doing it. And we understand what we're doing and, more importantly, why we're doing it. And in the resources page, I'm sorry, never mind. I do have some article I wrote on mindfulness. I meant to include that link. Let me see. I'll talking to myself right now. I'm sorry. I'm going to upload some more resources to that repository as well. To have some other links in there. So finally, to build self-awareness, take time to reflect on your actions and explore why you did the things you did and what drove you to do those things. This is difficult for anyone to do, but you need to take that time for reflection in order to understand yourself better, which has great benefits for you and for the library. And so the key to self-awareness is introspection. And we need to, that honestly explains our behaviors, our motivations, our strengths, our weaknesses, and our overall performance and capacity as librarians, as leaders, as people, outside of work. Your moods and feelings and emotions, right? They're neither good nor bad. What we tell ourselves about our feelings and how we use them determines their values. So work on understanding what makes you happy, what makes you sad, what makes you upset. Keep a list of the work and interactions you do and how they make you feel. What about that interaction made you feel fulfilled, and what about that work gave you low energy? Work on understanding why you do the things you do. Learn to take a step back and analyze your actions. This is difficult to do in the moment, but afterwards, really think about what happened and why. If you had, a meeting maybe that went really well, all right, well, what made it go well? Like, what happened? What did I do? What did this other person do? How did I respond that made this meeting go well? If it didn't go so well, we'll do the same thing and just think about that, and either how you can kind of replicate that in the future or correct that in the future. And just be honest with yourself, right? And so use this information, like I said, the next time you're in this situation. I mean, I think it's really important to understand kind of what makes us, what do we enjoy and what do we not enjoy? What gives us energy when we do it? What doesn't give us energy? I don't know if you ever talk to people and you're just like, well, what do you like about this job? Or like, what kind of work do you like to do? And they kind of give you a blank stare, but they can talk for like 10 minutes about what they don't like. And so really kind of develop and focus on those things about what about your work kind of gives you energy, high energy, low energy, again, and these kind of develop these kind of self-awareness things. And you can start to think more about what's behind that and the reasons why. So self-awareness is about being aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it. But self-management is about controlling what you do. So a self-managing person exhibits feelings appropriate for the setting, bounces back from adversity, is non-judgmental, and does not act without thinking through the consequences. So a self-managing person can control and change her moods and responses to match the context of the situation. So individuals who are adept at self-management are better able to see projects through to the end. They don't let their moods detract from the work they have to do, nor do they let a setback derail them. They're adaptable. They can change their plans when needed. Self-managing people understand that in order to meet their long-term goals, they're going to have to sacrifice in the short term for greater rewards in the long term. So consistency and emotional stability creates trust in those around you. No one wants to go and ask questions or bring a concern to someone whose mood varies widely and often. Okay, knowing what emotional response to expect from a person makes people more comfortable in interacting with them. And this consistency builds trust among your colleagues and builds a culture of trust in your library where people feel free to talk about important issues and take risks to innovate. Self-managing individuals do not let their mood dictate their actions. They're active, not reactive. They take initiative, they seize opportunity. And self-management means taking care of things and facing up to situations, even when your mood says not to, right? You can't just work, you don't let your mood dictate what needs to be done, okay? If something needs to be done, it needs to be done. So in order to improve our self-management, we want to make ourselves accountable to others, especially when it comes to progress towards goals. So having an accountability partner with whom you check in each day or week or month can help you stay on track and provide needed support. And we want to respond to a situation, not react. Right? And this kind of goes back to a point in self-awareness, which is to see each situation in person with fresh eyes. When we react, we fall back on a habit of letting our mood or initial emotion carry us and act out for us. But when we respond, we're giving the situation the proper attention and emotion that it deserves and needs. And often, again, I'll pause in between what's happening in your response is the difference between responding and reacting. So take time to consider what automatic behaviors of yours that limit you. How do your reactions affect the people around you? Do they become more or less trusting of you, more or less open to you? And reflect on these kinds of questions from time to time in order to know where you can direct your energy in improving how you respond to situations. Part of learning to respond instead of reacting is to delay your response, right? Like I just said. And this has been one of the hardest things for me to learn because I want to give an answer in order to move a project forward or clear something off my plate. But I have at times kind of regretted my responses. So sometimes we get really excited about an idea or project and we fail to see its shortcomings, or other times our initial reactions hold strong over the long run. But no matter the case, when we take time to delay our response, to mull over what we want to do, then we can be assured we're making the decision in a much better place instead of just reacting with our emotions. And so this kind of builds on the idea of alignment and self-awareness, making sure our facial expressions, body language, and actual language align. So as a leader, you should be aware of and manage your body language and facial expressions. And this is whether in a group meeting or one-on-one. Sighing, slouching, looking bored or irritated, playing with your pen. I used to work with somebody, used to do this all the time in meetings. Playing with your phone, that's a huge thing for me as well. I get slightly bored and distracted and I'm on my phone. All of this doesn't send a positive message to the rest of the group or the person that's speaking to you. So this is, again, another difficult one for me. I don't have a poker face. So it can be tough for me sometimes to hide my feelings about what is being said. So learning to control my facial expressions has taken some time and some practice, and I'm not always successful in it. But this is something that I'm aware of and try to work on as best I can. So another part of self-management here is to monitor what you say to yourself. Do not let those temporary thoughts, those negative thoughts, the bad moods, or the temptations to cheat your values become permanent ideas. Let those ideas pass or just mindfully disrupt the false narrative that's running through your head. And so think about kind of what things do you call yourself if you make a mistake, or you call yourself a dumb, you call yourself a failure, a terrible leader, librarian, terrible person. And think about this, would you let someone else speak to you like that? All right, so don't speak to yourself in a way you wouldn't let others speak to you. And we can get caught up in the voice in our head, right, which dictates our mood and what we express and show to those around us, in turn influencing their mood. So our mood can also influence our decision-making, causing us to make poor decisions or keep us from making any decisions at all. And so again, this is about that emotional control, that self-management that we mean to make sure that we're in control of our emotions. And finally, we want to be able to take care of ourselves, right? So get a hobby, take some time away from work, do things that replenish you and recharge your battery, find healthy ways of dealing with stress and the expectations and workload. So we crack jokes about wine and chocolate, but those aren't the healthiest ways to deal with work and life problems. So when we talk about emotional culture, we need to talk about taking care of ourselves and each other, right? Many organizations talk about having a healthy work-life balance, but they don't always follow their own advice. Again, this is one of my shortcomings as well. So we should all be good examples of working hard, not coming in late or leaving early, but we all must be cognizant of when our pace will lead to stress and burnout. So for leaders, when our pace leads to stress and burnout, so those in our department or in our library, And then just on an individual, when what we're doing, the pace we're going on is going to lead to our burnout as well. Okay. So you can only run a car in the red for so long before the engine blows. So you might have a higher red line and can run longer than some of the others around you, but you want to keep an eye out for them, and make sure they're not showing signs of getting ready to blow. And you want to keep an eye on yourself, be aware of those signs that you're getting ready, your engine is getting ready to blow out and you're going to need a rebuild. All right. So building on what we talked about in self-awareness, we're going to use our self-management to develop and use what we do well and limit what we do not do well. Okay. So social awareness. So social awareness is being aware of the people around you, their emotions, and the social situations that you're in. So we've all been around people who did not know how to kind of read a room, right? So they either prattled on about some nonsense, boring everyone, or they just kept saying inappropriate things for the situation they were in. And then the key to social awareness is empathy, right? So empathy is the ability to read, understand, and experience another's emotional state and respond in a socially appropriate way. Again, going back to Salovey and Mayer, it's to them, it was the most important aspect of emotional intelligence, right? Empathy is the ability to understand others' emotions, to actually kind of feel them for yourself, and to respond in, again, a socially adaptive way, as they said. Daniel Goleman refers to empathy as our social radar. So, and he continues, being emotionally tone deaf leads to social awkwardness, whether from misconstruing feelings or through a mechanical, out of tune bluntness or indifference that destroys rapport. One form this lack of empathy can take is responding to other people as stereotypes rather than as the unique individuals they are. So again, approaching every person and situation with fresh eyes and responding to what's happening in front of you. And just at the very least, empathy requires being able to read and understand another's emotions. At a higher level, it entails sensing and responding to a person's unspoken concerns or feelings. And at the highest levels, empathy is understanding the issue or concerns that lie behind another's feelings. And empathy represents the foundational skill for all the social and competency, for all the social competencies important for work. And there's kind of three types of empathies. There's cognitive empathy, so understanding another's perspective. There's emotional empathy, so to feel what another feels. And there's empathic concern, and that's to sense what another needs from you. And those individuals and organizations with high levels of empathy offer better customer and patron service. They understand the feelings and emotions of those they're helping without them needing to express those feelings and emotions. Empathy can also help with creating a diverse workplace. Through empathy, we can relate to others, one human being to another, regardless of the differences in race, religion, or background. So empathy is seen as the foundation for social awareness and for much of emotional intelligence, but empathy also has some drawbacks. So when it comes to recognizing and understanding others' feelings and perspectives, empathy is a must for any human being. But when we take it a little further and we say, well, empathy means to feel others' emotions, well, and take them on as if you were feeling them as well, that's asking a lot from someone. And to do that with your family members or close friends is one thing, but to take the feelings of a whole library is a little too much. Empathy can cause bias, right? Research has shown that empathy may lead us to make poor decisions to benefit someone who might not need it. And we can also show bias in how we empathize. We empathize more with people who are more similar to us. As human beings, we like people who are like us. As I said earlier, it can be hard to empathize with more than a few people at one time. So how do we manage multiple and conflicting needs? Too much empathizing can lead to elevated stress. And empathy can trigger areas in the brain that alert us to danger from others' suffering. So too much empathy, right, can actually cause us to distance ourselves from another person's distress. In other words, our flight instincts of the fight or flight or freeze kick in. So researchers and writers have now started to use the term compassion instead of empathy. Daniel Goleman, in fact, has started to use the term compassionate empathy. And so compassion is the ability to understand others' perspectives and use that as a catalyst for supportive action. Compassion can also be seen as the wish that people be relieved of suffering, including ourselves. And I think compassion works better than empathy because empathy requires us to take on the burden of another, while compassion helps work with another to alleviate their burden. Empathy can lead to burnout, while some research has shown compassion can actually lead to resiliency. And of course, self-compassion is a must for all of us. We can use compassion outwardly and inwardly to want others to be free from suffering and to want to alleviate our own suffering as well. And empathy is good for being attuned with our environment and library culture, and compassion is better for dealing with the emotions in others and the workplace. So having said all that about empathy, right, it's still a valuable tool, especially cognitive empathy. Organizational awareness comes from empathy, and by observing and understanding others, we learn the politics of an organization, important and powerful social groups, and the organizational culture. By understanding the culture of our library, we learn the norms, attitudes, and taboos of the culture, and we're all expected to adhere closely to the culture, even if what you want or need to change the culture, you want to make sure not to get too far astray too fast. So organizational awareness also helps us to learn how attuned everyone is to everyone else in the library. So in the book Primal Leadership, Daniel Goleman and his co-authors have developed the concept of resonant and dissonant leadership. So resonant leadership is when a leader is in sync emotionally with others in the organization, and this makes followers comfortable, more willing to share ideas and work together. And the driving force of resonant leadership is empathy. Dissonant leadership is when a leader is out of sync with others. So this creates fear and anger throughout the organization and causes leaders to register negatively with followers. So dissonant leaders do not use empathy and often exude negative emotions. And so this concept of resonance and dissonance can be applied to the whole organization. When members of a department resonate with each other, a much healthier emotional culture is present than when they do not. Resonant organizations, they have unity and purpose, they embody core virtues and values, and they have a vision for the future, they're generous with each other, they're respectful towards each other, and they're compassionate with each other. And teams with high emotional intelligence, they just understand each other, they're caring, they have a higher purpose, they're engaged, trusting, and they celebrate each other's successes, which is something I love to do. So how can we use social and organizational awareness to improve our library's emotional culture? Well, first, and this might seem like a no-brainer, but I have to mention it because it's so important, is to recognize your coworkers as people and relate to them. Make a human connection with those people you work with. It might not seem like much to call people by their names when you greet them. Remember the little things about them and their family. We all worked with people who asked us the same basic question multiple times. This demonstrates they're not listening, right? And which would lead us to think they don't really care. So through these actions, we build a foundation of the emotional culture that people in the library matter. Daniel Goleman writes about the emotional economy, which is the sum total of the exchanges of feeling among us. So in subtle or not so subtle ways, we all make each other feel a bit better or a bit worse as part of any contact we have. So while its operation is largely invisible, this economy can have immense benefits for any organization and to set the kind of tone for organizational life. So we need to allow people in the library to be heard and express their emotions, even if they're not the ones that you want heard or expressed. They need to be allowed to do that. We need to approach people and respond to them with the proper emotion. And while we reflect the emotion of another to build trust, we also need to be able to redirect emotions in conversations. We should acknowledge feelings, but also counter negative emotions with positive feedback. So we need to be careful not to get drawn into a negative or tangential argument. We can also influence others' emotions through our own emotions. Another way social awareness is important in managing emotional culture is through group problem solving. So by getting feedback from everyone, we make everyone feel a part of the process. We're also able to learn about and appreciate the perspectives of other folks in the library. And we need to make sure we reward the behavior and the work that we want to see. This reward does not have to be something big, but a verbal recognition or one sent through email helps that person know we were paying attention and we cared about their actions. And when it comes to social awareness and managing emotional culture, we also need to nip problems in the bud. Too often, little problems, which could have been dealt with easily and effectively, grow quickly into big, complex problems with no easy solution. By using social awareness, we help to create a culture where people are held accountable and where conflict can be dealt with in a more healthy way. Social awareness allows us to know who's helped to enlist in creating new cultural norms or changing existing ones. And I think if one of the basic things I'd want anybody to take away from this is address a problem when it arises. Don't wait months or years down the road to try to then address that problem, because now you've got a whole host of other issues that you're going to need to deal with as well. Right, and then relationship management. And this is about initiating, building, and maintaining relationships inside and outside of our library. And having good relationships throughout the organization helps the leader to influence, inspire, and mentor others. This also leads to better teamwork and an easier time managing change. So work culture and environment are mostly about relationships. The better the relationships, the better the library performs. These relationships do more to determine the success of the organization and the fate of the library and all those involved than most any other factor. So relationships need to originate in a respectful and honest place. People are not a means to an end, but an end unto themselves. Trying to build a relationship with a person because of what that person can do for you is inauthentic and disingenuous. Using people to better one's position is not a relationship or an effective use of social skills and emotional intelligence. When we betray trust in a relationship, we may never be able to regain it. Better relationships between everyone leads to better organizational citizenship behaviors, right? And these behaviors can be described as being very involved in an organization and job beyond one's job description to make positive contributions to the organization, which is important in today's ever-changing organizations, including libraries. So we want to be able to communicate effectively. Communication must be honest and frequent. When you talk, be both intellectual and emotional, right? This allows you to connect with more people on various levels. It allows your listeners to feel the words you're saying, exude warmth and energy in your communication. Communication is about more than talking. It's also about listening. When you're with other people, be present. I mean, really, truly listen to people. Don't just wait for them to stop making noise so you can say what you want to say. Listen, ask questions for clarification, repeat what they're saying in your own words. Also, pay attention to their facial and body expressions. This can tell you a lot about their emotional state that they otherwise would not say. And making someone feel heard is a type of art, right? So Carl Rogers, who's a psychotherapist, developed a rule to facilitate better listening and communication. So before speaking, each party must restate what the other person said, and both must agree to it. This helps people come to a real understanding. It helps to consolidate and really gets to the point, especially after a long story. And we can't misconstrue others' arguments if we're repeating them and then the other person's agreeing to them. So good communication is central to all the social skills we have discussed. Without it, your emotional intelligence is really going to fall short. So we talked about building positive relationships with social awareness. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how to de-escalate and repair antagonistic relationships. First, a couple of general rules. We want to focus on the facts, not the personalities or the people involved. You want to ask yourself, how did I contribute to this problem? Too often we think it is always the other person's fault, but when we look honestly, we can see what we have done as well. This goes along with questioning our assumptions about what's happening and why it's happening. Meet hardness with softness. When we meet hardness with hardness, something's going to break. Meeting negative behaviors with like negative behaviors is like adding gasoline to a fire. And finally, give the other person room to back down. When we feel desperate, we fight ferociously. So giving someone the ability to gracefully back down helps ease tensions and allows them to save face. So one method that works well to repair antagonistic relationships is called the 3 R's. It's redirection, reciprocity, and rationality. So in redirection, we find common ground and create a sense of unity, often via a third-party enemy. So listen, the university put us in this position. I didn't want us to be in there, neither did you. Okay. Other ways include discussing common interests or talking about a source of tension in a favorable light. We're both here to help students succeed, or neither of us likes this, but we can both learn and grow from it. Reciprocity, give something before you're asked, right? What you give should be of value to the other person. When people are given something, they feel the need to give back. There's this whole research on Christmas cards. I'm kind of running out of time, but it's pretty fascinating. This researcher sent Christmas cards to just random strangers, and he got, for years, got Christmas cards back from these people. So do not ask for something right away. Ideally, they're going to reciprocate by supporting you. And then finally, rationality, right? A statement of what you want from the relationship, to be allies or to be supportive working colleagues. Finally, kind of the passive aggressive colleague, right? Again, we don't want to respond with like emotions. We don't want to get upset. This just increases the problem. Just kind of breathe and take a step back. Understand why they're doing what they're doing, and give them the benefit of the doubt. Too often we think someone is doing something due to outright maliciousness. They might not be able to handle conflict or know how to constructively express themselves. So we're always assigning rationale to other people for their actions, but it's usually just best to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume they're not trying to be malicious. There's just some difficulty there. Don't try to change them. We spend a lot of energy trying to change other people's opinions, minds, behaviors, eating habits, whatever. All of it's kind of a waste of time. The only person you can control is you. So stop trying to change everyone and just focus on the message, not the delivery, right? So you might say something like, what I heard you say was, and then repeat kind of their core argument and their core point. This goes back to good listening. And they very well might have some important points or ideas, but they're just kind of unable to express them. And you can kind of be the emotionally intelligent person who helps walk this conversation through in this relationship. Okay. So don't tackle it all at once, right? You can't solve all of this in one weekend. It's too overwhelming. You want to set your aim high and work small. All right. Start with what's in your power right now, and succeed at that and kind of watch your circle of influence grow. And in managing emotional culture, small things add up to big things, okay? And I kind of took a little bit longer than I had planned, so let me just want to get through, make sure you have time to answer any kind of questions. So I'm gonna kind of go forward through this review real quick. These are some of the items that I talked about that were really helpful. Emotional Intelligence 2.0. by Bradbury and Greaves, and then Harvard Business Review has some really good reads on emotional intelligence. And so these are really good here. And I also wanted to put out my contact information. So Moya, are there any questions that anybody has?
Yeah, so thank you for that. We've got a few questions. I'm going to start with a question that a couple of people asked around, and I'm going to sort of combine the two questions. Um, so I'm wondering how you would adjust or thinking about EI in relation to people who are neurodivergent. Some of the body language mentioned for EI sounds a little ableist or neurotypical. Do you feel EI factors in neurodivergent people?
That's a really good question. I was actually just thinking about that and thinking about how like this should probably be updated to talk about that, right? And I think that part of that comes from learning that other person and getting to know that other person and changing your expectations around certain things. So if you for instance, if you expected that they were going to respond a certain way in a facial expression or a body language, and they don't because they're neurodivergent, it's important then to learn and to say, well, here's what I can expect when I go and talk to this person or work with this person. I get to know them and I get to understand what their responses are and how they respond and what that looks like with them. And then when you then approach them, is you then put this set of standards or expectations in your mind when you go to work with them, so that you have just a better outcome and a positive outcome in a positive working environment. So I think it's getting to know that person, understanding they're coming from again, understanding that person, knowing that person, understanding what to expect from them, and then making sure that when you go and work with them, you have those expectations in your mind. And I think you're going to have a really positive and good outcome with them.
Okay, thank you. How do you guide an employee who needs to develop their emotional intelligence?
Yeah. Yes, that's good. I think some of that, I used to, say leadership kind of comes down to having awkward conversations with people. So there might be a couple of ways that you can do that. One, it might be, demonstrating this emotional intelligence and setting a good example for them and seeing if they respond. But if you see them not responding, not copying, is to then kind of sit down with them and have this, using empathy, using compassion, using your emotional intelligence to have a conversation with them about where you see room for improvement, and kind of laying out some ways that they can improve, supporting them in professional development as they work to improve, supporting them, giving them that positive feedback when you see them improving and doing the things that they need to do. So, it might come down to just if you're their supervisor, right, sitting down and having a talk with them and using your emotional intelligence in order to have a good conversation that helps them and supports them to improve.
Okay. Any suggestions for surviving or thriving when you are managed by someone who is moody? They're not good at staying grounded and using emotions wisely.
Yeah. So there's a whole concept of kind of managing up, and sometimes we need to manage our supervisors as much as, or excuse me, that water went down the wrong way. And maybe manage them more than the people that we're actually supposed to supervise. So I think the thing is being grounded in who you are, not letting their moodiness dictate to you what your mood's going to be. Go in there with and being firm and knowing who you are, that self-awareness, and then just working not to let it affect you and not let that be contagious and you to take that on and you to become moody as well. And so and maybe at some point, depending on that relationship there and depending on your comfort level and your confidence, to maybe have a conversation there to say, and maybe if there's an opportune time, right, a situation comes up, and just say, to maybe kind of gently broach that conversation with them. You're a little bit moody. people don't quite know what to expect from you. Don't start off with you're a little bit moody. Maybe like people maybe sometimes aren't comfortable approaching you because they're not sure kind of what to expect, and kind of, how can we help with this something. But I think more than anything is just don't let it control you. You go in there and you do your thing, and you be confident and self-aware and emotionally intelligent and mature. And then I think having someone you can go and just kind of vent with helps as well, too. So
All right, great. There was a follow-up question to the neurodivergence, which I asked for clarification, and I did something where the question disappeared. So I apologize for that, but we are at time. So hopefully there can be a follow-up conversation about that after the session.
sure.
But I wanted to thank you, Jason, for answering the questions and for a great presentation. It was a pleasure having you here. And for all attendees, before we close the session, you can see in the chat there is a note about completing the evaluation. It's available in Schedule. It's labeled feedback survey and is directly above the session description. So thank you all, and we hope you enjoy the next presentation.
All right, thank you, Moya. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Yep, thank you. Great.
All right. So I think that went pretty well. It went a little longer than I wanted or planned, but
It happens to the best of us.
yeah.
All right. I have to jump in to moderate another session, but
Sure.
thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you. Thank you. All right.
All
Take
right.
care. Bye.
Thank
You
you.
too. Bye.